Hi everyone, Crista Cowan here with another episode of the Barefoot Genealogist. Today we are talking about city directories. They are a very valuable resource in family history research, and yet they tend to be a little bit underused. And so today, following a formula we've kind of been using a lot in our broadcasts over the last few weeks, we're going to talk about where you're going to find them. We're going to talk about why you would want to use them, and then I will show you some tips and tricks or some how to research some of those city directories to find what it is that you're looking for to further your own family history research. Really brief introduction today. Let's go ahead and dive in. These are great records. I want to make sure we have enough time to talk about them. So let's start with where you're going to find those city directories. If you're new here, you might not know about the card catalog. The easiest place to find those records is going to be in the card catalog, and then there's actually a category or a filter for directories. Here's what that looks like. When you hover over search, card catalog is going to be the bottom option there. And then over here on the left-hand side, you're going to have these options to filter. And in this case, we're going to filter by collection. One of the collection types or categories here is schools, directories, and church histories. So I'm going to click on that, and you'll notice that that makes my list of 31,000 some odd databases a little bit smaller. I can then filter again specifically to city and area directories. Now, you'll notice I do have telephone directories there as an option, but telephone directories, of course, are going to be a little bit more current or recent. If we're looking for historical records, we're going to want to use those city and area directories. That then takes me down to a list of about 1,900 directories. I can then filter further by location if I want. If you're looking for a specific town or a specific state, you can filter by US and then down to that particular location. However, for our purposes today, I just want to take a look at the list as it stands here. Now, this card catalog always filters by popularity. And so the database that's almost always going to show up at the top of that list, because it's the most used city directory database, is our US City Directories. They cover from 1821 to 1989. And you might notice over here, there are 1.3 billion records in that single database. So that's one of the reasons why it's the most popular, is because it's so large, but also because it covers the entire United States. So I'm going to go ahead and open that in another tab. I just right-clicked on that, click Open in New Tab. That pops it up over here so that I can take a look at it in just a minute. There are a few other directories that you might be interested in. The U.S. Public Records Index, those records typically start in 1950 and go through 1993. Again, full coverage of the United States. They're a little bit smaller, just under 500,000 records each. Those records are collected from modern phone books, voter registration records, tax records, those kinds of things. Anything that's considered a public record in the United States went into creating those two databases. So if you're looking for more modern information, including maybe even some information about yourself, these are the two databases you're going to want to use. If you're looking for historical information, you're going to want to start with this US City Directories. And then if you're looking for information about the UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, we have directories for those locations as well. We also do have some smaller databases of more focused records. In this case, there's a database here that's got about 5 million records in it. They are city directories from Ohio and Florida, kind of an odd pairing, but this is actually a free database because it was indexed by our World Archives project community. We have Massachusetts city directories, Connecticut, New York, Rhode Island. So there are some databases specific to that location, and certainly you're going to want to go look there. But if it was me and I was doing U.S. research, I would always start with this U.S. City Directories database here. Now, you can filter to those others by location to kind of narrow that list down and find what you're looking for. But like I said, always start with this U.S. City Directories database. Now let me just give you a little bit of a bonus tip here. One of the things that you can do, if you have a database that you use a lot or that you want to remember to refer to, we do have quick links on your Ancestry homepage And I would encourage you to make use of that. So let me just show you where to find that. If I'm on my homepage on Ancestry.com, I should have somewhere on this homepage on the right-hand side a set of quick links. It's called My Quick Links. If you do not have that, you're going to want to customize your homepage, find it in this list over here, and then add it. That's how you get it. Now, the way that you add a quick link to that, you just click Add Link, and then it gives you the opportunity to put in a URL. In this case, I would want to copy the URL here of this database, and then I would just paste it right into here, and then title it something like Use City Directories. What that means then is, and you can see here, I have a few things on Ancestry.com as well as a few other websites bookmarked here in my quick links, so that when I'm on my homepage of Ancestry.com, I can just click on them and it will take me directly to that database so that I can start searching right away without having to go through the card catalog. So I would encourage you to do that, especially if you think you're going to be using this particular database a lot. Now, let's talk for just a minute about why you might want to use city directories, what benefit it's going to be for your family history. The first thing is that most city directories are updated yearly, so it's a really great resource for tracking your family through time. Census records, especially here in the United States, are taken once every 10 years on the zeros, so 1910, 1920, 1930. And city directories, however, are updated yearly, and so if your family moves in between censuses, it allows you to track them. If your family changes jobs or somebody dies or any of that information, it allows you to narrow in on that decade into specific years. Now keep in mind they are updated yearly, but they're usually published a year later, so it usually takes them about a year to gather the information and then to, of course, set it and print it and publish that and then disseminate that information. So a 1940 city directory, for example, the information was more likely collected in 1939. So it's about a year delayed in most cases. That's been my experience. Now, another reason why you might want to use city directories is that tracing addresses can help you locate your family in other records. So for example, let's use the 1940 census as an immediate example. A lot of people sometimes have a hard time finding their family in 1940, and that's because the 1930s were a really tumultuous decade. Of course, it was the Great Depression. A lot of people had to move, even people whose families had lived in certain locations in the United States for generations. When the Great Depression hit, they were forced to move, and so we lose track of them. They're not living where we think they should be living, or something has happened in the family. If you use city directories to trace their locations, then you have an address to use when you start searching the 1940 census, or at the very least a specific town or city. Military records also oftentimes will have an address. So for example, a World War I or a World War II draft card will list the address of the person. And you can, if you know the address in the city directories, if you've traced them through those city directories, you can know that you have the right person. Which also leads us to this next reason why I use city directories a lot. Even when I have a relative whose name I feel is really unique, more often than not, I'm going to discover that there's at least one other person with that name. Very often, especially in some of the smaller communities, they're going to be cousins, first cousins, second cousins, named after a grandfather and born about the same time and living in the same place. And it's really easy to just look at a name and say, oh, he has the right name and he's about the right age, and just assume that you have the right person. City directories help you differentiate some of these things a little bit. And the reason is because they're alphabetic. So unlike a census, which is done just by house, if you have two cousins living in the same town who have the same name and are about the same age, you're probably not going to discover that right away on a census. Or you may even grab the wrong guy and think, oh, you know what, here he is, and he's married to this woman and he has these children, when in fact that's not him. So city directories, because of the way that they're laid out, you can see really quickly if there are people with the same name living in the same place. City directories also very often list occupations and sometimes even employers. And so it helps you, again, differentiate between men of the same name so that you can determine who is your people and who are not your people. Addresses also help to do that. If you have an address on a census, then you can compare that to the addresses in the city directories as you trace them through. So something to really get into the habit of doing and thinking about is making sure that when you are researching somebody that you've got the right person. You don't want to be tracing somebody else's family tree. You want to be tracing your own family tree. And then one of the final things, and this is a very often overlooked reason to use city directories, a lot of times when we go into databases, especially on Ancestry.com, we do name searches. And that means we're looking for someone specific. But we need to start thinking about communities, the communities that they lived in and worked in and worshiped in. City directories will have addresses for those churches and the cemeteries and the other businesses that were in existence when your family lived there. And so if you're looking for a relative in a cemetery, start with the cemeteries listed in the city directory when they were living there. Because a lot of times the cemeteries that you are thinking about or that you're familiar with didn't exist when your ancestor lived there. They're newer than that. And so this will help narrow your search a little bit. Churches are really valuable because most states in the United States did not start keeping birth, marriage, and death records until the early 1900s at a state level. There were a lot of records kept at county levels or even at a town level before that, but churches are a gold mine of information. They would record the membership of the church, baptisms, weddings, burials. All of that information is held sometimes at a church level. And so if you can become familiar with the churches that were in your family's community at the time that they lived there, again, you're going to narrow your search down to the possible places where you might need to go to look for additional information about them. So with all of that said, let's conclude today with a few demonstrations about how to search the city directories most effectively. Now, one of the first things that you need to know is that this, especially this database, but most of our city directories, most of our newspapers fall into the same category. They are indexed by what we call OCR. That means that a computer actually looked at these records and indexed them. A computer read the page to create this index. Now, these records, most of them come from microfilm. So it was original records, and if you have ever held or looked at a city directory, you know it's not the best quality paper, it's not the best quality printing, but these original records were microfilmed. So now we've got two generations of records, an original document that has then gone to microfilm. And that then introduces what we call noise noise on the image. So if you can see right here, like there's this little scratch here, and that could have been on the original, or it could have been something on the camera when it was microfilmed, or something on the page when it was filmed. You'll see a little smudge or a little maybe an ink mark over here. This is a fairly clean image, but you might also notice here, this particular page is skewed just a little bit to the left. So this one looks straight up and down, but the way that the page may have been torn or worn in the original document when it was microfilmed, this page is skewed just a little bit. And so all of that affects the way that the computer can read the image. So we have amazing OCR technology, and it actually fields the records, meaning it can look at a line and hopefully tell, based on the way that things are indented, capitalized, it can tell what a record is, and we try to create records out of those things. But all of that, causes some problems. And so OCR is the fastest, easiest way, especially considering we're talking, remember, about 1.3 billion records in this single database. It's the fastest and easiest way to get them to you, but it does mean that there might be some tricks you need to do in order to search them effectively. So the first thing I would suggest that you do is check the Browse This Collection box to see if the area, the city, the town, and the year of interest for you are included in the collection. I don't want you to spend hours and hours searching for something that doesn't even exist in this particular database. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to look at this, browse this collection box, and if I was looking for example, if I was looking for something in New York and I was specifically interested in Brooklyn, and then I can look here and it says the years 1862 through 1933 are included. And if you look, you'll see gaps here. Sometimes big gaps. In this case, it goes from 1913 and it jumps to 1933. Sometimes we have them for every single year almost. If we look here, 1907, 6, 4, 2, 1, 0, 1899. So it's just a 1 or 2 years skipped here and there. And then we have long runs where every single year is included. So that's really important. Just look at this, browse this collection box, and what you're looking to determine is the city and the year that you're interested in there. And if the year, if I'm interested, for example, if I'm looking for my family in that gap, that giant gap between the 1880 census and the 1900 census, because that 1890 census was destroyed in a fire. This is great because there are city directories for every single year between 1880 and 1900. And so I know I can go year by year by year looking at that. So just check the browse box just to see if what you're looking for even exists in the database. Once you've done that, then you can do a search for the surname in the specific location that they lived in. So for example, my family, my last name is Cowan, and my family lived in Ashland, Ohio. And so I can say, I want to see all Cowans from Ashland, Ohio, and then you'll notice here I've clicked match all terms exactly. So that's the only thing that I'm going to get in my search results is anybody with the last name Cowan living in Ashland, Ohio. There are 100 of them, so 2 pages worth. And it looks like most of them, if I skim down this list, come from this 1917, 1919 city directories. Oh, there's one for 1921, right? So I can just skim through this list and see what years show up. Now keep in mind, there are 100 results, but because there are multiple years represented, the person or people that I'm looking for may be included multiple times on this list. That's important. So know that you're looking for somebody sometimes in multiple years. So do a search for a surname in a specific lived-in location. Notice I marked both of those exact. The reason I ask you to do that first is because it gives you an idea of how common or uncommon your name is, or the name that you're searching for is in a specific location. In this case, I'm only searching for people who lived in Ashland County, and I'm only searching for people with that last name of Cowan. And 100 search results come up. That's not very many. That's good for me to know, to start to understand what works. Now, if I had searched for Smiths in New York City, that might be a little bit more of a different or a more difficult situation. But once you've done that and you have an idea of what you're looking for, then you can refine your search as needed. So then I can come in here and I can just click Edit Search, and I can add a first name if I want to add a first name. Mary is my third great grandmother, and you'll see here she's listed in 1917, 1919, and 1921. Now, this 1921 is a little bit interesting to me because my third great grandmother died in 1919. So is this her? And the city directory was just created early enough that she hadn't died yet? Or is there someone else named Mary Cowan? Certainly worth investigating. So search really broad on the surname and the location, then refine just to get an idea for how common that surname is in that location, and then refine that search as needed based on names. Now, once you find a record that you're interested in, be sure, remember these are alphabetical, be sure to look at others on the page with the same surname, because what you're often going to find is going to be family members, or maybe even family members you didn't know about, just additional information. So I'm going to go ahead and right-click on this record, open it up in a new tab, so that I keep my search results here on this page without losing them or having to go back and wait for the internet. But now my search results, I can open them one at a time here. So this is the 1917 census, or city directory rather. The address affiliated with her is 415 West Liberty, Ashland, Ohio. Her occupation is going to be listed as ID. Now, I don't know what that means right now, so I'll show you here in just a minute another trick for discovering that. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the image, and that's going to take me to the image. Where we can, we're going to highlight the name on the page. So I don't know if you can see this super faint, but we've highlighted Mary's name on the page here so that you can pick it out a little bit easier. But again, they're alphabetical, so you should be able to find it fairly quickly anyway. So here's Mary, and here is something interesting. It lists Mary E. Cowan, widow of Rob W. Well, that's one of the ways that I know that I have the right person, because my Mary Euphemia Sterrett Cowan was the widow of Robert Watson Cowan, and so I know I have the right person. But what this also does is it tells me that in 1917, or a year or two before that when this directory was put together, he had already passed away. And so look for those kinds of clues. You'll notice some of the men listed here, their wife's name is listed in parentheses immediately following that. Well, all of a sudden, what happens if in 1 year the wife's name is not listed? Very likely that she passed away in that time period. So when we're talking about censuses that are only taken every 10 years, or that giant gap between the 1880 and the 1900 census, those are the kind of clues you want to be looking for from year to year to year to determine or to narrow down that window of when somebody in your family may have passed away, so that you know when and where to look for a death record or go to a local cemetery, okay? So you're looking to see, is a spouse's name listed in parentheses year after year after year and then all of a sudden disappears? Or is a woman listed as the widow of someone? Look, those are the kinds of clues you're going to look for. Now, in this case, my Mary E. Cowan, widow of Robert W., there's an H here and then an address. Now, you're going to see a lot of little abbreviations in some of these city directories. There's a Lou M. Cowan up here. Her abbreviation is BDS and then an address. EMP, here's an H, here's an RMS, LAB, lots and lots of little abbreviations. And so one of the things you need to do is you need to know what those abbreviations mean. And they don't always mean the same thing from directory to directory. So in some cases, I'll just give you one example. In some cases, there will be an R here, and that means residence. But in some cases, there's an R, and that means renter. And so you need to know for this directory, what do these abbreviations mean? So if you look right up here, and I don't know if you can see this, but hopefully you can at least see where it is on the page so that you can go and look for yourself. Right up here above the image, you're going to see page number and then a page number that you're on, or image number, of however many there are. You can actually type a number into that box and click go, and what that'll do is it'll take you to the first image of that particular directory. And then I can go image by image to see what is of interest here. So in this case, for example, lots of advertising as I go image by image through this directory. However, when I get to page 9 in this case, there is going to be a city history, just a brief little history about the population, some of the things of interest, some of the industry that is available in that city. That's interesting to me because my family lived there. I want to know about that community. And so look for just a brief little city history. You're going to find that a lot. Sometimes, not in this directory, but sometimes you're going to also find maps. Little community maps. And again, those are important because sometimes the maps that we use in research are, they're taken so far apart that things change. But if I can find a map in a directory, I know it was what that city looked like at that time, and I can be pretty assured that the addresses are going to be accurate. Now, I'm also going to keep going page by page here, but when I get to image number 20, what I'm going to find here is abbreviations used in this work. And so here on page 20, after all the advertising, I'm going to find a key or a code to what each of those abbreviations mean. So EMP, for example, means employment. RMS means rooms, meaning they are living in a place and taking rooms. Let's see, what was the other one? I think there was a BDS, boards, right? So rooms just means they pay rent there. Boards means that it's probably some kind of an inn, a boarding house where they also get their meals, and there's a little bit of a differentiation there. You can have WKS for works, WID for widows, lots of different abbreviations here. So start to become familiar or look for this in the front of the books that you are looking at, but it needs to be that volume because, like I said, every city or every directory creator may have used a slightly different code for their abbreviations, and so what means something in one won't necessarily mean the same thing in another. So once I figure out what those abbreviations mean, then I can come back here to my image, and here's my Mary Cowan, widow of Rob W. Her home is at 415 West Liberty. Now I can look at all the other Cowans on this page, and here's an interesting thing that's going to start to happen. Here is a Bertha Cowan, whose home is also 415 West Liberty. Here's a Carrie, who is a dressmaker for the home company, whose home is at 415 West Liberty. Right? I can look through some of these other Cowans. Here's another one, Maud. She's a clerk at the home company. Her home is at 415 West Liberty. So what I'm seeing here is there are some other people living with Mary, other people who are adults with careers. I happen to know that Bertha and Maud are Mary's daughters. They're my great aunts. But I'm not sure who Carrie is. I have a great-grandmother named Carrie, but she wasn't a miss, and Cowan is not her maiden name. She was a dressmaker, though, so maybe I want to investigate this a little bit more. Which Carrie? Was it a granddaughter that was named after her? Who is it that's living with my third great-grandmother in 1917? Also, you notice two members of the family are working in a company at a place called the Home Company. Is that a family business? Because two members of the family are working there. That's worth looking into. Is it just that they, one worked there and got the other one a job, or could this be some kind of a family business? Certainly something I'm going to want to look into. So always check the other people on the page. The other benefit of that is, as I said earlier, if you end up with two people with the same name, this will help you know that there are two people of the same name, and you can pay attention to their occupations so that you don't confuse the two or merge records that belong to the other, or make some of that confusion. We end up with sometimes people in our trees that look like they're bigamists because they're married to multiple women, when in fact you've actually got two different men who just happen to have the same name. So always look at the other people with the same name. And then just as a little side note here as I wrap up, I like to always look up the address, and a really simple way to do that is just to use Google. I can come in here and I can say 415 West Liberty in Ashland, Ohio, and when I search that on Google, Google actually takes me and shows me the address. And in many cases, if there's a street view, I can also see an image of the home. So this happens to be actually, if I've done this before, so I know. I've zoomed in on this house, and the address on the house is 415. This house looks like it's old enough to have been standing in 1917, but I would probably want to check property records in Ashland County, Ohio, just to see when this house was built. And again, that's something you can just Google, Ashland County property records, and it will most likely take you to a database that you can search by address from the county and determine when this house was built, so that you know, is this the actual house that my ancestor lived in, or has that house been destroyed and a new one built in its place? So I like to always look up the address, some of the home, of the businesses, whatever it is, because it just helps me feel like I know them a little bit better, and I'm a little bit more connected with what it was that they saw and did in their daily lives. And then I think we've covered everything here. Look at others on the page with the same surname. Check that front matter for abbreviations. When you look at others of the same name, note the addresses and the occupations to differentiate. In my case, I will go into Family Tree Maker, and in the notes section, I will actually list the year. So in this case, I would list 1917, and then I would make a note about the information that was included about Mary in that 1917 city directory, with additional notes about other family members who appear to be living with her based on having the same home address. And then just a final reminder, when a woman's listed as a widow or a husband's wife stops appearing after having been listed for several city directories in a row, use that as a way to narrow down that death date so that you can focus your research looking for that particular death record. Like I said, lots of information to cover, but we are out of time today, so hopefully that was useful to you and you caught on to everything. If you have questions, I will be on our online chat in just a few minutes if you're watching this live, and happy to answer those questions. If you're watching an archived version of this on our YouTube channel, please feel free to leave a question or in the comments, and I will review those and answer those as necessary. I'm also putting together our August live stream calendar, so if you have suggestions for topics you would like to see covered in future broadcasts, please email me at ask@ancestry.com with any of those questions or challenges that we can frame into a presentation. Until next time, this is Crista Cowan. Have fun climbing your family tree.